Hello everyone and welcome to the Gunpla Network. I'm the Spicer and today's review of 1994's Shadow Gundam from G Gundam comes to you courtesy of those fine folks over at Canadian Gundam. Canadian Gundam is your one-stop shop for all things Plamo and Gunpla here in North America. With flat rate shipping to the US and Canada, a private warehouse option, and a vast catalog that's restocked regularly, they're going to have whatever you're looking for. So when you're placing your next order, don't forget to use the promo code Gunpla Network to save yourself 10% off. Now, this is a suit that is going to be a little weird. It's going to change up how I review this in kind of a strange way. Because this is more of a question of taste in the actual physical representation versus what you like in designs for Gundam, which is typically where I tell people to start. This has a uniqueness and a quality about it that I think give it its own charm. Now, I think there are some asterisks that go along with that, but this is not something that I think the run-of-the-mill kind of very casual Gundam Gunpla fan is going to look for, even if they have watched G Gundam and liked the show. I think there's a lot of other things they're going to look for first. Not necessarily because it's the Shadow Gundam, which is not super heavily featured throughout the show, but because it is a older 90s kit. I think this is much more of a deep cut in terms of kind of the audience it's being presented to. Now, with kind of those thoughts out of the way, and I will reference them kind of more as we go, let's take a look at the actual visual representation of the plastic in front of us. Now, there are two things you're going to notice pretty much immediately. One of them being the proportions, and one of them being the stickers. Outside of those two things, you're, of course, older 90s kit can have some pretty noticeable seam lines. If you're like me and you don't typically care too much about that, probably going to be fine. If you do care about it, you're in for a lot more work to fix this thing than you would be otherwise. But outside of that, like I said, there is a charm to this weirdly proportioned, kind of somewhat oddly stickered 90s vibe, right? And one of the kind of asterisks that goes along with this, or one of the qualifiers of why this could be an interesting display piece on your shelf, is if you have multiple from this line. Like if you have a bunch of 1/144 scale 90s G Gundam kits, or 2000s, whenever these came up, but 90s is 94, then I think this is actually a pretty cool display piece, legitimately. But it really necessitates not being the only one, right? You're not going to be able to put this next to the high-grade Future Century Master or Shining Gundams, because it will look significantly different. You'll see that here in a moment. But outside of the proportions being wonky in the head, the shoulders, the arms, the torso, kind of all over the place, it's going to have quite a few stickers. You're going to have the yellow on the shoulders, the yellow on the chest, which would be relatively easily painted over. And then you're going to have two fairly large white stickers that go over the front, or actually three, stickers that go over the front of the side skirts and then over the ankle armor. Now, if you didn't put the ones on the ankle armor or even the front skirt, I don't think anyone's going to notice, but they are there and they're fairly noticeable. Outside of that, though, the biggest kind of other vibe or visual issue I kind of have with this would be the arm blades being too short. Once again, this is kind of a more proportioning issue. Yeah, they're just not long enough. They're not going to really provide a lot of cool dynamic posing, which this thing is already going to struggle with. But they could just use a little bit of extra oomph in terms of the length, or maybe kind of the size department in general. Now, if we are looking at posability and kind of how it stacks up with other model kits, here we have it fighting the Shining Gundam, and as you can see, you can do some poses with it, but you also are a little limited. I will make a note here, the core fighter, which is one of the 3 or 5 accessories, depending on how you count it, is the absolute worst piece of accessory I've touched in any kit probably ever, because it literally does not work. It is being held in with sticky tack the entire review, and is a good portion as to why this immediately went into a plastic bagging into a shelf after the review was filmed. Once again, if I had multiple from this line of model kits, this might be a different story, but as I went off, I'm not really sure. You see the differences in the proportioning. Of course, the Shining Gundam is going to be a little different. It's a lot newer, but that's exactly the point. This is not going to stand up on your shelf against more modern things and look good. It is really going to spotlight how things have changed, so you need a bigger collective around it to kind of be more representative of that era, at least in my opinion. Now, if you do want it to, say, go against the Master Gundam here alongside the Shining Gundam, you can do that. But then you start to kind of see what I'm talking about with the blades being just a little underwhelming. This is definitely a kit that, even if you had others on the shelf with it, is going to probably be a static pose, just because it's kind of the easiest and most convincing to pull off and look good. I'm sure you could get some action poses out of this, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of hassle that really I don't think is going to pay off, largely due to the limited articulation. You do have some movement in the arms, but you really don't have anything in the chest or the torso, so hopefully you can sell a lot with the legs and the arms, because I wasn't able to, as you can see in most of these shots. And once again, it's not horrible looking, but it is just different enough that you can tell it's different. It's older. It's not going to blend in as much. But if you do decide to throw it into a static pose here, I think this kind of works. Now, once again, you're going to need other 90s kits to go around this if you're going to display it, in my opinion. But a static pose works significantly better. Kind of a fist on the hip, I think, works pretty well. Once again, it's got its own kind of old school kitschy charm to it that it's just something endearing about it that makes me kind of like this, but just not enough to justify the space it takes up on the shelf, which isn't even a lot, to be entirely honest. I just don't have a ton of space, so I have to be really picky. But what do I think as far as who would I recommend this to? Well, if you're a fan of G Gundam, there you go, right there. And if you're a fan of G Gundam, I would say with these being relatively inexpensive because of their age, buy a couple of these. Not a couple of Shadow Gundams, but like get the Shadow Gundam, the Rose Gundam, and the Dragon Gundam. Get a couple of different kits from this era and kind of make a little display out of it. I think that's kind of fun. I think it's a little unique with so many displays being really elaborate and focusing on master grades and these more advanced kits. I think there's kind of something fun about this throwback. So no, this kit is not irrelevant by any means. Now, that being said, if you are a builder that enjoys longer, more complex builds and you like a bunch of surface detailing and the visual representations being really elaborate, this probably isn't for you. This is much more a simple, fun nostalgia trip that requires some company, but is a unique thing on your shelf, I should say. So, is it worth getting? Yeah. I'm not going to say it's a must-buy really for anyone, but if you do want something a little different, maybe you're getting back into Gunpla, or maybe you just want something that's not going to take forever, that's going to be kind of fun to look at later, this and a couple of other suits from G Gundam from this era, I think is an absolute good time. Anyway, Thanks for sticking with me, guys. I really do appreciate it. Let me know in the comments below if you've built this, what you think about it. And if you're on the fence, put some questions down there. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. I do truly appreciate it. As always, friends, I've been the Spicer here for the Gunpla Network. Do your best to stay safe and keep on building.